Good evening. I'm Harold Pachios. We're on the air again with another edition of Pachios on the News. And this time, I thought we should find out what's happening in our city. The city of Portland is not only the largest city in the state, but there are 550,000 people approximately in the Greater Portland Metropolitan District. They are essentially dependent on what happens in the city and with business and the economy. And so while there are a little under 70,000 people in the city, there are more than 500,000 who are dependent on this city to be a vital, safe city. And so we invited Mayor Mark Dion here today to talk about what's happening in the city, the state of the city. And I will add, I've known Mark for a long time, and we'll go over some of the things, the public service that he has performed in his long career in this area. But I will say this, that in my judgment, and I pay attention to this, he is a good mayor. And he is, going back to what I started with, a mayor not just for the 68,000 people who live in the city boundaries, but a mayor for a good chunk of southern Maine, which is hooked to this city.
Exactly.
And so I live in the suburbs, but I depend on the mayor the mayor of Portland to do a good job because it's my city too. So, Mayor, welcome.
Thank you, Harold. I really appreciate the invitation to have this conversation.
Well, we're interested in your city and what you're doing and what the issues are, and I'm delighted that you're here. You're from Lewiston originally.
That's my hometown.
Grew up in Lewiston. French, Franco-American family.
Blue collar.
Blue collar.
All the men in my life, their hands were rough, hard. You know, they did physical labor. You know, they were the breadwinners.
I think it's important to know, we're going to talk about important issues here, but I think it's important to know a little bit about the guy in charge and what molded him. Where did he come from? It tells you a lot. It'll help you predict what he's going to be like. And so in your case, as you say, you came from Lewiston and from a blue-collar background. What'd your father do?
He was a firefighter for 28 years, but the way a firefighter's work schedule's laid out, he was able to be a carpenter, a craftsman in between that time.
And augment the family income.
Yes, augment. This was the era of single earners in a family. You know, the mom stayed home,
Yeah.
you know, to supervise the kids and be there to receive them when they came.
How many kids were in your family?
5 in my family.
Yeah.
And we accomplished this in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I had what had been a china closet insert torn out, and they slapped a bed in there. When I got to college, you know, people are excited, oh my God, I can party, I can drink. I was excited laying in bed and saying, I have a bedroom with a door. And my roommate was from Bangor, and he goes, that's kind of odd, Dion. I go, I'm telling you, you can't appreciate it. My bed was literally in a hallway all the time I'd grown up. So having a space with a door, to me, was true freedom.
That's interesting. So when you went to Lewiston High School?
Lewiston High School.
Okay, I asked you before, and you did everything, and among the things you did, you were also an altar boy, and you sang in the choir.
Yeah, till my voice left me.
Oh, you don't have that great voice anymore?
No, the best voice is like 8 to 11 years old, 8 to 12.
Yeah.
And then you go through puberty, and you start to adopt the sound of a man.
Were you able to sing some of the chants in the Mass? I mean,
Oh yeah, we did the whole thing. I mean, choir time was high Mass at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
So you got to do all that. I really enjoyed it, made a lot of lifelong friends in the choir.
Yeah.
That's where I learned Latin in both spaces. I continued that in high school, studying Latin.
Studying Latin. Now, after Lewiston High School, you went to the University of Southern Maine.
I did. It was called University of Portland Gorham, Pogo U at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. UMPG.
UMPG.
Yeah.
Far different than what we see today.
Yeah, yeah, far different. And then, so no one can call you, was talking about your background and what you did. You worked all the time. You had to work a lot.
I worked all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an ethic and a value system from my father. So I've worked in foundries. I worked in smelting, brass. I worked as an assistant to him. I did landscaping. I worked the ovens in a commercial bakery, you know. My father always said, if you want to work, there's always work. It won't be what you like to do, but there's work.
So there's work, and you worked, and then you must have got tired of the work, so you became a lawyer.
You see, my father was very ambivalent about my going to law school.
Yeah.
He did not trust attorneys.
Yeah.
I think he sensed that they were sophisticated and spoke a language that he and his friends really didn't understand. They would give things up to a lawyer for the services they might need, but I don't think they've ever fully appreciated the integrity that the profession has, because it was so distant from them. Yet I remember them celebrating when a gentleman named Armand Dufresne became a judge, because it was one of them. One of them had finally broken the barrier.
First Franco-American to be on the Maine Supreme Court.
Yeah.
No, second, I'm sorry to say. My friend and your friend Severin Beliveau's father was the first.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I can remember them being so excited about that.
Yeah.
So
Then after college and after a couple of jobs, you became a policeman for the city of Portland.
I did.
And you were a policeman in the Portland Police Department for 21 years.
That's right.
And you became deputy chief.
I did.
So you were taking those exams all the time to get to be, lieutenant and captain. And
there was a woman on Munjoy Hill. Her name was Ida Tucci. She was a widow. Her husband had passed from cancer. And through circumstance, she became friends of myself and another police officer, my partner, Jeff. And she started inviting us to her home for dinner while we were on patrol. And the two became six. And then the sergeant wanted to know what the hell was going on in the building. And we explained it to her. But to your point, we did chores around the house for her because she didn't have her husband anymore. And when I wanted to pitch in with that, she'd say, not you. You go in the living room and study, because you're going to be their boss one day.
for the next promotion.
So I had enforced study hours with Ida, and
Yeah.
I really appreciated that.
And you were married at the time and
I
had
did.
a young family. And,
Yeah, I have two daughters. My wife has been in nursing now 46 years, mostly in the ER. Now she does visiting home health.
You've been in the ER in a hospital in Portland?
She worked at the ER in Brighton. She worked at Mercy and at Maine Med.
Yeah.
And her resume looks a bit scattered, but if you pull back the curtain, she looked for positions that would help me take the next assignment and really realize it to its full potential. So she became a bit of a vagabond in order to make sure I had the opportunity. And second, we committed to really co-parent our kids, so one of us was always home.
Tell me, when you started first and you were a patrolman, did they walk in those days?
Yeah, they did. We had 35 foot beats in the city.
Really?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. And frankly, I enjoyed the footbeat assignments because even in my limited time, it struck me that most of the detectives had been foot patrol. And as I did foot patrol, I understood why. They were able to have relationships with the people in the neighborhoods, and the people in the neighborhoods would actually wait to make a complaint till the foot officer came, and that's how you make contacts.
Yeah.
My first detective sergeant, if a major crime came in, he'd watch our phones to see who was calling us. And the people that get called, a lot of them had spent a lot of time on foot patrol. I wish we could bring that back. I wish I had staffing. It's such a beneficial way to approach policing because you see people as they are, not just at the end of a 911 call. It's the worst time to meet someone,
Yeah.
is responding to their 911 emergency. You don't have a real frame for who they are. You're trying to stabilize something. But if you're walking a beat and you stop into a business or talking to people on their stoop, you get to have a sense of what the community is about.
Knowing people, talking to people is
That's it.
important. And, you know, young people today, they're just on their computer and their iPhone and everything. And it's a lost art of actually communicating directly, looking at people's eyes, sizing them up, listening carefully to what
Having
they're
a
saying.
conversation,
Having a conversation.
you know?
Exactly.
And sometimes a private one. People don't know how to have private conversations anymore. They can
Right.
be so helpful.
So then, after 21 years and as a policeman and deputy chief, you decided to run for sheriff of Cumberland
Well,
County.
To be honest, I
Yeah.
had just gotten back from a stint at the Harvard Jack Kennedy School of Government.
Yeah, the JFK school
The
at
JFK
Harvard.
school,
yeah.
yeah. And I really wanted to be chief of police,
Yeah.
right? That was the ultimate pennant
Yeah.
that I was running for. And I talked to the chief at the time, Mike Chitwood, for those who might remember. And I was direct.
Clint
with-
Eastwood, you mean?
Clint
Clint
Eastwood.
Eastwood, yeah.
I said, do you have any plans on leaving anytime soon? Because if he had said, I'm going to leave in 2 or 3 years, I would have probably hung on
Yeah.
at the chance of becoming the next chief. And he didn't have any sense of a goal line. So I said, fine. And it was a few weeks afterwards that then Sheriff Wes Ridland called me, took me to lunch, and said, I haven't told anyone. I'm not running for re-election as sheriff. I think you'd make an excellent sheriff. And I got the blessing from Chief Chitwood. I got a very warm support and commitment from Bob Ganley, the city manager. His concerns were a little bit more narrow. He goes, the sheriff spends my money. I want you to watch it, you know, and get
Yeah.
us the services we need. So I ran for sheriff for 3 terms, 12 years altogether.
12 years as Cumberland County Sheriff and ran the jail.
I ran the jail, and I also had about 40 patrol officers out in the community. So I spent a lot of time outside of Portland. You talked about it earlier, the other.
Bridgeton or Naples or
Standish,
Standish.
Harpswell.
Yeah.
Today that helps me. I know some leadership in all of those communities,
Yeah.
you know, so I can reach out, and when we do have the chance to collaborate, we do. I mean, Portland doesn't live in a bubble, but sometimes I think we fail to appreciate how interconnected we are.
Totally interconnected.
Totally.
So then you went to law school. You established a law practice,
I did.
and you were in court.
Yeah, I did criminal defense.
Yeah.
Of course, that my former colleagues were aghast that I'd gone to the other side.
Yeah.
And I said, look, if you do your job well, all I'm going to be involved is arguing a sentencing
Yeah,
recommendation.
right.
If you haven't done your job well, then it's not personal. I'm quality control.
Yeah.
And then I learned in my practice, some months would go by, and then I get a call from someone still on the job, and they go, hey, they call me chief. They hate chief. You know, my brother-in-law is not a bad guy. I go, what's the problem? And then they lay out the problem. I said, all right, have them come in and see me.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's worked well. You
So
know,
you were, I think, 6 years in the Maine House of Representatives.
yes.
So you've run for in a lot of elections.
Well, you know, I guess the footnote is this. I did 12 years as sheriff. In the last year, I told the staff, I have gotten accomplished with all of you almost everything that I had on my checklist. I think it's time for me to go. I think it's healthy for an organization to see transition in top leadership. I just do. And I had hopefully groomed the chief deputy to take on that role. And I told, he's now Sheriff Joyce, so it did work out. I said, Kevin, you will be the first sheriff who's come up from the ranks. I said, it's fitting.
Yeah.
And I want to help you accomplish that. And I thought my dream would be I would go off and quietly practice law. And after a few months of that, members of the Democratic Party said, you need to come to Augusta.
And so you ran and won the state legislature, I think, 3 terms.
Yeah, 4 terms altogether.
Altogether, including the state senate.
Yeah.
And you became state senator.
Yeah, I represented part of Portland and a good chunk of Westbrook.
So I was thinking we have a lot of political figures in our state's history that are known for having these various roles. George Mitchell is one of them. But here you are, deputy police chief, sheriff, state House of Representatives, state senate, mayor, sheriff.
I did a few years as a city councilor. I didn't arrive here.
Oh, there's another one.
So I'm the first mayor to have actually served on the council.
So how many, you probably, we can't take the time to count them, but you must have had at least 10 or 12 elections that you've been in.
Oh God, yes, with 4, yeah, maybe a dozen or so elections.
Dozen elections.
Different.
How many have you lost?
Well, none.
0.
0.
So you're 12 and 0.
12. I'm 12 and 0,
Yeah.
and they were all very different. I mean, the sheriff, you're running in 28 communities.
Yeah.
You know, state senate. You know, I had a big piece of Portland and a good size of Westbrook.
Yeah.
Even when I was a state rep, the district that I represented, we have almost half of Falmouth. I remember meeting with the Falmouth Town Council, and they wanted to be assured that I would be a voice for their concerns as much as Portland's.
Yeah.
And there are no other Portland reps that represent any other city.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've always been that odd duck.
And you know, and as a result of all this, you know a lot of people inside Portland and outside Portland.
And inside state government and county government.
Right. So I'm going to get to that in a minute. We're into state government and politics and city government. I want to say to the folks, you can tell I kind of like this guy. He's a nice fellow. And the other thing is, I've lived a long time, and I was an active Democrat for a long time. I was a Democratic state chairman. But I look at this division in our country now, you know, Yankees versus Red Sox. Everybody, one side says the other side's the enemy and reverse. And I said, geez, I came up in a different time. I would say I'm a moderate. You know, I'm not mad at Republicans. I don't want to go to war with people. And the thing that has always appealed to me about the mayor is I think he's a moderate too. And that there are not enough politicians in our world today about whom we can say they are moderate. But I want to get into that. Is that of any assistance in political office today, to be a moderate?
Yeah, somehow lately it's become like a slur, that if you're a centrist, heaven forbid, you stand for nothing. I'm a Democrat. I think being a Democrat informs my thinking, but it doesn't control my judgment.
Yeah.
Judgment is left to the facts that are before you, and you try to make the best decision for the broadest amount of people that you can. So I believe in common sense. When I was elected mayor, who were the first people to call me to wish me well?
Who?
Republicans.
Republicans.
They said, you know, we don't always agree with you, but we trust you're going to be the best leader for Portland possible. You know, and even now when I lobby in Augusta, I'm invited into their offices to talk, and we don't agree, but they're willing to have a conversation with me. And through that conversation, I think we make progress.
There's a city, when you say you lobby, for the city, for
For
your
the city.
And so there are things that the city needs, and you can go up there and deal with both Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, the more senior members of the bodies remember me when I was serving there,
Yeah.
or they're aware of the work I've done in the committees that I chaired. It's just not about demonizing people. We're at war with ourselves because we're so quick to put people into camps. Life's more complicated than that, and the more you get to know others, the more you can see that complexity.
Well,
And
give me an example of this year. Are you having to go up to Augusta and deal with the legislature on anything?
oh God, general assistance.
General assistance?
Yeah.
Which is welfare, right?
It's welfare. It's what supports immigrant families getting apartments that are subsidized. It supports our shelter efforts to deal with the unhoused. It's about providing emergency relief for a brief time for those who fall off the rail for whatever reason. I mean, a lot of people don't realize some people are homeless for just a short period of time. They just need a little assistance and focus to get back on. But what's the story in Augusta? The story in Augusta, it's the big bad evil Portland who's trying to capture all the general assistance for the state. I told some of my Republican friends, what makes you think that I would get up in the morning and try to win that race? That doesn't even make sense. I said, over half of the people, sometimes greater than that, of the individuals that are in our homeless network don't even live or come from Portland.
Over half?
Oh, yeah,
don't come?
well over half. They don't come from Portland.
And do they come from other places in Maine?
Pick a city, they've come from there.
So you're saying that in Portland, this service is being provided to a whole lot of people from other places
From
in
other
Maine.
places. And that's why I've consistently said, and we'll get to immigration maybe, but in terms of providing services for the unhoused, we're delivering a state service. And we've had agreements and partnerships with Augusta to help subsidize that. And you can't turn around afterwards and say, oh my God, you're using too many dollars. I said in a speech up there before the Appropriations Committee, I said, it takes $87 a night to staff a bed so somebody can be there and get the services they need. You're proposing to cut us to $44? I said, I have a dog. If I bring him to the kennel for an overnight, okay, and I have to provide the food and the bed, they're just providing space and supervision, it costs me $75 a night. Are we saying that humans deserve less? I hope not. You just can't turn your back on the poor. It's a challenge, and it is an expense all of us have to bear, but we have to have some humanity in our life.
I agree with you. Mark, immigrant housing. We have a lot of immigrants that have come to Portland. Talk to us a little bit about what we're trying to do for immigrants and why it's a good thing.
Well, I've been exposed to the immigrant issue since the early 80s. Back then, Catholic Charities was a principal coordinator of the arrivals of what we now call new Mainers.
And many refugees.
But at that time, the flow was such, you could almost get a family or a couple to adopt the family and help them through their transition. So government was light, but community participation was high, and I think it worked. And at that time, the wave of new Mainers was coming from Southeast Asia. After that, from the Caribbean nations, we got a lot of unattached males. It's tough to come here strictly alone and make it work. And then when I was in the state legislature, I once made public pronouncements that my reading of the tea leaves was that the federal government was going to default to municipalities to pick up the tab and try to make it work. And that's why I've consistently urged and critiqued the current administration for not meeting that responsibility. It shouldn't have just fallen to Portland. Now, in the last few years, we've had a big surge. They're showing up at ports of entry already with the address of the Portland Health and Human Services Office
So
in
wait a minute,
hand.
you're talking about ports of entry outside of Maine?
Yeah, in Texas,
In
Arizona.
Texas, and somebody in
Arizona.
Texas is telling them Portland, Maine?
Not the people in Texas. They come to the border. Remember, we have wireless communication?
Yeah.
So folks here feel this is a welcoming city. They seem to believe they're going to get on with their lives. So they tell others that are trying to come here to come here.
You're saying some immigrants in Portland say, yeah, look, this is not a bad place to come.
It's not a bad place to come. This thing called winter is a little destabilizing, but they're getting through it. And when I talk to immigrant families, what's the number one thing they bring up? Education. Their view of a good life is not necessarily about them. They want to position their children to become true Americans. And their path to accomplishing that in the immigrant parent's mind is they have to be educated. That couldn't be accomplished in our home country, but we might see that realized here in Portland.
I'm glad you said that because I come from an immigrant background, and I know that when my father came to this country from a village in southern Greece, a mountain village, it wasn't much education there. Probably my grandparents went second or third grade education, but that's why they thought when they got here, they looked around and said, if our kids get educated, they're going to get absorbed and assimilated into this society, and they're going to live the way these other people do. That's what they think for their children. This is what they thought. Doing this for the children. This is my grandparents thought this about their children, and they're going to do well, and it worked.
It did work. I mean, I think it's a reasonable dream to have, and I see immigrant families working hard. They're doing all the jobs we don't want to do. I mean, I hear the critics, immigrants are lazy, immigrants are taking our job. My response is always pick a side, and I'm willing to argue on that. But they can't be both. And there are significant...
They can't be lazy.
They can't be lazy and
taking
stealing
their jobs.
and stealing my job at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, I don't see a crowd lining up to be CNAs in the hospital or work in housekeeping. I don't see them struggling to beat them out for a grocery job. I mean,
The last thing that I would say about any immigrant who's gone through hell to come to this country is that they're lazy. That's the last thing. You can say a lot of things about them, but they're not lazy.
they're not lazy. I mean, they have lessons to learn, their culture function differently, but they actually, I know this comes as a shock to some, they actually do believe in the American dream.
That's why they're here.
Some of us take it for granted. For them, it's a conviction,
Yeah.
you know, and what we can do to incorporate them into our community will pay dividends in the next generation.
So we have a large number of immigrants, and you believe, you're the mayor, you're around these people and these issues all the time. Most of them here legally?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Everybody says, even in Augusta, these illegals, they're not illegal. If there's one rumor I wish I could just swat away is this notion of illegal. These individuals, if they're refugees or asylees, that's a status that the United States government granted to them to allow them to have lawful entry in the country. You may disagree as to whether or not they should be given that status. We all can have reasonable arguments. But to say they're illegal is wrong.
Now, to be sure, there are a lot of illegal immigrants in the United States, but we're talking about
my
Portland.
adult daughters are raising their families in Greater San Diego. If we were to sit there with their friends, if we were to sit with my sons-in-law and their business associates, they would say, oh yeah, we have illegals. And you know what? If they all run south tomorrow, we shut down. Okay? And what do I hear from them? And is our system doesn't make sense. You know, and until we fix that, the cities are going to scramble.
We got to bring order to our immigration system, but politically, with Republicans, it's been the third rail. Nothing they want to get involved in. So every proposal, even Trump, the last time we had Republicans and Democrats put forth in the Senate an immigration reform bill that would straighten out a lot of this stuff, but Trump called him up. I don't want to get into Trump here, but he called up the leadership and said, kill it, because he wants the issue.
It's sad there are so few spines in circulation.
Yeah, that's right. So, so you're up there in Augusta and you're lobbying and you're telling people, and you tell Republicans too,
Yeah.
that, look, general assistance, here's the reason it's important for society, for our community, and I need you, Republicans and Democrats.
I said in conversations to the Appropriation Committee, you can cut the budget. I have absolutely no control over that. I'm not languishing in ill-advised hope, but the people don't disappear. That's my message to you.
Yeah.
They do not disappear. We are still going to have to deal with them. And you have an opportunity to do what's right. Now, I will say the House Democratic Caucus has been extremely supportive of the challenge Portland is facing. Other senators, their idea is, well, we spend too much money. I go, look, why don't you come down? Let's go see what we give them. You know, you involuntarily want to live in those conditions, but to them, it provides some hope. One Republican got a little bit snippy. I says, you know, I had to go out and see families in cardboard from Central America with little kids shivering, you know, and we had to get them.
Where was this?
They were over on Myrtle Street.
Yeah.
Our family shelter was at capacity. There was no place for them to go. We don't get to say, we can't provide you safe harbor. You can say that in Augusta because those people are so far away, they become abstract.
Yeah.
You know, I have the responsibility to recognize that they're human beings and they're in jeopardy and we have to act, right? And all I ask Augusta is meet your fair share for us meeting this state challenge, period. You know?
We don't know until we get the budget process is finished in the summer.
Yeah, it looked like we had a deal for the supplemental, and that's critical because it would allow us to maintain current levels of spending at the shelter. But here's a sidebar that I haven't seen the press cover. We're the only city, I think in New England, last I checked, but let's just limit it to Maine, so I'm absolutely correct, that runs a nursing home and a geriatric center, Barron Center out on Brighton.
Yeah.
If Maine Care doesn't get funded, we're going to lose about $1.5 million immediately in operating revenue. So what do I tell those seniors? Let's pack it up. Where are they going to go? So
What about the families who have relatives at the Barron Center? They should be writing some of the legislators who voted against funding this.
exactly. I mean, and it's sad because a lot of Republicans talk about family values and how important their families are. I remember telling the Republican Senate majority, I says, you know, you're crazy. That idea is crazy. And he chuckled and said, from you, I take that as a term of endearment. I says, good, Jeff. We have to talk real. You know, and real has nothing to do with party affiliation.
Yeah.
I said that as a sheriff. There's no Republican way or a Democrat way to run a jail. There's the right way, there's a fair way. And that's what we need to get back in politics.
So, so you're a moderate, and you sound like a moderate. And a lot of people watching this program, a lot of us who live in the area, intrigued with the changes in the Portland City Council, because I've been dealing with the Portland City Council for nearly 60 years, and mostly they were citizens who just wanted to serve for a while on the council, but now it's gotten quite political and ideological.
Yeah.
And it was never really ideological in the old days, but it's ideological now. and you're a moderate, but you have a lot of progressives, you have some social democrats, which are socialists.
Yeah.
They're basically they're not Democrats, they're socialists. So there's quite a mix there. You seem to get along with these people. How do you do that?
To recognize their people too. I give them the respect they deserve, and hopefully they will give me that in turn. It's not about their ideology, it's about the idea and whether or not it makes sense for the city. I mean, somebody said, well, how do you fit into that council? I said, well, I think they see me as a happy Ronald Reagan. Right? I mean,
Happy Ronald Reagan.
Happy Ronald, because I'm the one that's going to push on cost. I'm the one that's going to say, is this really what a city should be involved in? I mean, when you cut away all the frosting, city government is about street repairs, sidewalks, making sure the parks are a place that you actually can bring your kids to, that we have adequate police and fire services. It's very core offices that we need to support so they can get their job done. Like DPW, I worry more about DPW than national politics, because for my constituents, DPW has a right now, today impact on their lives. So when some councilors want to...
You're talking about snow plowing and filling the potholes?
Here's a good, I guess it's a good story. I mean, we chuckle about it. It was one of the major storms, and I had met with the city manager, and she had developed with her team a triage strategy to get to all the streets, given at the time she didn't have full staffing for the plows. And I agreed with it, made good sense. So we had the storm, and there was quite a bit of snowfall in that one. And my wife was standing in our dining room window with a coffee, but she had folded her arms and she says, come here. And I walked over and I go, what's the matter? She goes, look out there. I go, yeah, we got a lot of snow. She goes, look at our street. I says, it's not plowed. I go, that's true too. And she says, why? I go, Cheryl, we live on a cul-de-sac. We are not a priority right now. They will get here, but we're not on the first tier. They clean the main avenues, they'll do them again, and then they start doing the other major streets. They will come here. And she turned to me, she says, you don't have any power.
Yeah.
And I went back and made my coffee. And
Yeah. So your wife observed that the mayor's street doesn't get plowed. Yeah.
well, it did. Now, by late afternoon, they
Yeah.
came down, they did a wonderful job. But I knew when they came down my street, the rest of the city was in a good place.
Yeah.
You know, and that's municipal government. You know, we're not a Congress, though some of my colleagues on the council would like to think we are from time to time.
Well, you dealing on your council with a bunch of people that many of them who don't agree with you ideologically, but as you say, really a lot of it's about the Department of Public Works and city services,
It
and
is.
not ideology.
It's not about ideology. So when that gets infused, I try to check that. But in order to check anyone's behavior, they have to trust you. And you can't have trust unless you've actively, intentionally try to have a relationship. To know their kids, what's important to them. So you can frame things so they can take a second breath and say, you know, yeah, I can see your point. Or not. Sometimes they feel passionate that Portland needs to stand for certain things, you know.
So when they call you a Ronald Reagan, it wouldn't ordinarily be a compliment, but they say a happy Ronald Reagan, that makes it complimentary.
Yeah, well, no, I call myself a happy Ronald Reagan based on other feedback I get from them. You know, one counselor, I mean, more directly, said we would like not to like you, but we like you. So I felt I was doing my role as mayor, that I can be a fierce advocate for what needs to get done for the city without making it a personal attack. And we heard earlier that, you know, I run good meetings because I intentionally do that. It's not a battleground, it's a business process so that we can actually air out the city's business in public.
Sounds to me, just by implication, that probably some of them think who have a different view than you, that you like them too.
Yeah, I don't have I can go out to lunch with any of them. I mean, for instance, Counselor Sykes and I are never on the same page politically.
Yeah.
Just not. Occasionally she is, so I make a point of acknowledging that. See, that's a breakthrough moment. But personally, I don't have any problem going out to lunch with her or having conversations about what goes on in her life. And what's the gateway for that? I served with her father in the legislature. Her brother's in the Secret Service, has been on Portland PD. I know that family. I don't have a problem with the family.
Yeah.
She has different views than I do, but it doesn't prohibit us from working together if they want to work together.
So one of the big issues around here is the homeless.
Yes.
And you've dealt with the homeless when you were sheriff, you've dealt with when you were police. You've spent decades dealing with homeless, but it's a far bigger crisis now, I would think.
And what's worse because of fentanyl. Sometimes I say we don't have an unhoused crisis as much as we have a fentanyl crisis. And those who are addicted.
You say
it's a fentanyl thing.
Fentanyl thing.
If tomorrow I could wipe out all the fentanyl in the city, I would hope that these individuals would slowly move back into common community, and we could find places that would work for them, transitional housing.
You're talking about addicts.
Addicts. Hey, look, addiction is awful, and I think for a lot of these unhoused individuals that are completely captured by fentanyl, they can't make an informed decision. See, there's one of the ideological debates we've had on the council. Some on the council believe they're in a bad place, we just need to give them time to make a decision. I go, then you really haven't experienced what addiction looks like over the long term. The longer they're on, the less they can make a good decision. So when it came to the camps, I said I'd run on sweeping them, and once elected, I did. And it wasn't always welcomed by all members of the council, or the public for that matter. But I thought it was cruel and unusual punishment to let people live in those conditions without having a forceful intervention, period.
You can't, I happen to agree with that. You claim to care about them and want to help them, but you know they can't care for themselves, and you know they can't make good decisions because they're impaired. And then you say, so give them freedom and let them do whatever they want. Let them live however they want. That is cruel.
And some of the activists would come to me and say, well, that's their community. You're making a judgment call. I go, yes, I am. And I'll make no apology for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess those are the cop genes that still flow through me. When we get called to a 911 call, we don't hold a commission. We don't call for a committee. We make decisions.
Yeah.
With the available facts. And to me, the rats running amok,
You say rats?
Rats were everywhere.
You don't to give us, is it like down on Commercial Street? Did they have?
I mean, when we started
Under
moving,
the bridge?
when we started moving the tents, it was like brown waves
Of rats?
of rats. But then the people that were there, many had injuries from being gnawed on by rats when they were out.
Gnawed on by rats?
Yeah. I mean, the lesions, everything there was unhealthy. How anyone can conclude that this was a community that should be protected as they sought self-determination.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not there. And I was confident that if I'm wrong, y'all send me home, right? I've approached every elected position that way. I will do what I believe is in the best interest of the people who sent me to the office. And if one day they decide, Mark, you're a great guy, but it's time to say goodnight, I'll do so gracefully.
But some of the people that think you're not ideologically in the right place, let me step back a minute and say that I had a counselor, a Portland counselor, on the program a couple of years ago while we had these homeless encampments around, and she was pushing. She said, leave these people alone. What right do you have? This is their community, and
No, that's what I'm talking
this is
about.
oppressive and so forth. But what do they say when you tell them that the people they're trying to be nice to and to help, they've got them someplace where they're being gnawed by rats. What do they say about the rats?
Well, even the rats, when we cleared those out, the public showed up at the next city council meeting to decry the fact that we had intentionally tried to kill rats with outside
Wait a minute, they came to protect the rats?
They came,
Are you serious? Wait a minute.
Listen,
you're
I
saying,
always hoped that would become a Boston Globe story because people would say it's definitely a fantasy piece, but it wasn't. They felt
wait a minute, hold on, Chief. Give us the picture. This is the city council meeting?
This was city council meeting. And
So people came to the microphone.
and said it was unnecessary for us to kill the rats. I was chided by one counselor because I called them vermin in a media piece, and I said, well, that's because they are.
The rats are vermin.
They're vermin. They're a public health threat.
Yeah.
Rats are not ideological. Rats are rats.
Right.
And it was my intent to work with the city manager to clear that out. So, one young woman said, I've taken 4 home and they've all died.
She adopted 4 rats?
Well, they were trying to save them. It was like...
Wait a minute. This is the sub-story I never knew. Hold on a minute. We're talking about homelessness in Portland. We got the mayor here. And now we see there's a sub-story. The sub-story is that even the rats had advocates.
They did.
Oh, my word.
And it's... I gave a presentation to an Eggs and Issues, the Chamber's a monthly conversation. I said, for all our planning, and we had plenty in order to execute this strategy, I never thought I'd have to worry about the rats. So
wow,
that's the beauty of politics, right?
Yeah.
You can prepare for what you know. It's the unknown that's going to come over and run you over.
Who could have predicted that they'd try to put you on the defensive about your treatment of the rats?
Only in America.
Only in America. Now, while we're on interesting issues, the Portland City Council has some views on foreign policy. And so they enacted a resolution condemning Israel and demanding that the city take certain steps, whatever steps it could take, to punish Israel. I guess contracts, I don't know of any.
It was a divestiture.
Divestiture of what? The city has money invested in Israel?
Well, through some of the funds that we invest in.
You invest in some funds, yeah, okay. And then so that you get some income from the money and not be interest bearing. And were they able to determine which companies your funds were invested in, which do business in Israel?
In the final analysis, they couldn't find anything to divest from.
There was nothing they could find. But anyway,
which is indicative of the level of government we're at.
Yeah, but these folks are into symbols. It's all symbolic and being on the right side. And being on the right side. What they perceive is the right side. So you voted with them the first time around.
I did.
And then you changed your mind.
I did.
Well, that's unusual. I've been around politicians my entire life, and I like them, not some of them, most of them. But the one thing that I always notice is they never say, I was wrong. Were you wrong the first time?
Yes.
You were?
I was, look, I got caught up. I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
And if you played the tape back of that meeting, my goal was I was trying to say, like cops do in the field, is put your hand on somebody's shoulder, Israel, and say, stop, take a breath, look at what's going on. I genuinely was concerned about Gaza children, but they're Israelis' children too. When I got home that night, I didn't even make it up the stairs, and my wife opened the door and she said to me, what did you do? And I knew exactly what she was talking about. She says, "What did you do? That's not you." And so I went into 2 weeks of reflection and conversations with people I respect, and I concluded I was wrong, that I shouldn't have taken that position. No one elected me mayor for my foreign policy chops. There's the humble reality.
Yeah.
That's not why people cast their ballot for me. You know, if I was running for Congress, it's a legitimate question. But as mayor, I don't do foreign policy. And I'd lost my way, and I come from a Franco culture that says when you're wrong, you stand up and you admit it, and then you move on. So that's what I did. I gave a speech to the council declaring I'd exercised poor judgment in making that vote, and told the reasons why, that on reflection, the resolution divided Portlanders. It didn't unify us. You know, and I thought that needed to be said. It fractured relationships. It made an entire community anxious and afraid of what that meant, that a council would do something like that. So I didn't ask the councilors to withdraw the resolution. They're probably still comfortable with having cast that vote. But I got to look at my own face in the mirror, and I decided I needed to do something to reconcile my own conscience. And that says I'm wrong.
Did you get attacked by any of the people that were on the other side?
Sure. I mean, I took some negative emails. One of the Palestinian organizers did send me a very nice card and kind of tried to say, I hope I understood her message, is I think your concern for children is genuine, you know, and we're disappointed that you've done what we've done, but maybe we could work again someday.
You know, we're on this issue now, and I'm fascinated by it because I think it's a case of people, particularly young people, apparently, who can't hold two disparate thoughts in their head at the same time. The disparate thoughts are that the Palestinians have real grievances. They have real legitimate grievances, and they have been mistreated, and they have been displaced by Israelis. On the other hand, that's a political question and one that needs to be resolved. This was a war, and the Israelis were attacked by Hamas. Hamas knew exactly what was going to happen. They didn't think the Israelis would welcome them. They didn't think they'd get praise for them. They thought, like any nation, that the citizens of Israel would rise up and demand that their government respond militarily, in kind. So Hamas, I mean, I know a little bit about, I've traveled a lot to the Middle East. I know a lot about how terrorist organizations operate. So what did they do in Gaza? They're underground. They surround themselves with civilians and with children, knowing that if the Israelis drop a bomb, civilians are going to get killed. So therefore, don't drop a bomb, and we're protected. And of course, the Israelis, they also know that Hamas says our goal, our objective is to eliminate Israel. So you got to hold both of these things in your head at the same time, and it's difficult. You can be for the Palestinians, and you can understand how the Israelis reacted, and keep those thoughts in your mind at the same time.
Intellectually, I completely understand what you're talking about, but I had to come to terms with the fact that as mayor, it's not my wheelhouse.
Definitely isn't.
It's not. And I think the story, the postscript, is I've been humbled by the number of emails that I've received from outside Portland, outside Maine, and it's kind of odd, but wow, you're a politician that actually admitted in public they made a bad decision.
Unusual.
Well, I guess I'm sad that it's unusual. I guess political leaders need to once in a while be candid and honest with their constituents if they made a mistake.
I got contacted, of course, that story became a national story. What the Portland City Council resolution spread to newspapers and television stations across the country. A couple of days later, I get a call from a friend of mine, a college friend of mine. I graduated from college 66 years ago, and I get the guy.
53, but go ahead.
A guy calls me up, and he says, "What's wrong with your city?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Did you see about this resolution?" He was so worked up. Why do they get involved in this? Why don't they worry? You know, he said something, you said, why don't they worry about some potholes too? So anyway, he was worked up. When you changed your mind, that also went across the country. The same guy called me up from Omaha. He said, "I read about your mayor." So it was kind of an interesting phenomenon, what happened. And you heard from people around the country as well.
It affirmed in me that you just tell the truth. Sometimes the truth is not in your best favor, but I want people to trust me. And if I can't be candid with them, if I can't admit if I've misstepped, why would they have any trust in me, you know?
So, but we don't know whether there's any permanent political damage from those who disagreed with your change.
I don't worry about that, Harold. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm serious. I think the freedom I feel and the positions I've had is, I've always known they're not permanent jobs. And I met with colleagues who really lust for that they're going to be in this game forever. I don't see it that way. Maybe I'm a Jeffersonian. At some point, you go home. So if I go home a little earlier because of a decision, that's okay. You know, it's the will of the people, just as it is, you know, the will of the council. Once they've made a majority decision, I have to execute that decision, you know.
Well, that's a good note to end on, Mayor.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for talking with all of our viewers and listeners. Appreciate it very much, and we hope to have you back another time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.